Hello, I am Quinn Ringel, and I am a semi-avid movie watcher, I'd say. But I also, on the side, I listen to music, just like any other person, I'd say so. I don't know. I don't know what other people do. I've actually met people that don't listen to a lot of music. It's actually kind of weird, but I mean, like, people can be people, I guess. But because I am also in a music sphere of some sort, I am aware of Anthony Fantano, the internet's busiest music nerd. And instead of doing, some music review of some sort, he actually reviewed a movie of which I very much do enjoy. And so I wanted to see what he said about it, and you can probably guess from the title, he didn't very much like it.
Which, why am I talking about it? But there actually are a couple of interesting musical tie-ins with the movie.
And so his video, like almost all of his music reviews, it kind of starts with like a little background about Marty Supreme and the marketing behind it. And he even went into a little bit of detail about Timothée Chalamet. He at some point kind of mentioned, and this isn't like a very major point or anything, at some point he kind of mentioned that he doesn't like Wonka.
All this for a ping pong movie. A ping pong movie that I went out of my way to go see. And I walked away surprised to find that this thing wasn't really actually much of a ping pong movie. They're usually more about the main character or group of characters overcoming adversity, showing grit and determination, but I didn't necessarily go into this movie expecting that. So yeah, even though there have been some recent Timothée Chalamet films I haven't necessarily been crazy about, be it the Wonka movie or even the Dylan biopic.
Listen, I'm not the most diehard fan of Timothée Chalamet, and I also, I don't think Wonka is the best movie ever, but I kind of enjoyed it. Like, Wonka actually had like pretty strong performances, not only from Timothée Chalamet, but like, for example, Key from Key and Peele, he was in the movie. He was like some police officer guy. He was extremely great in that movie. I absolutely loved his performance. And while I dislike the thought of so many studios wanting to make sequels and prequels of movies and franchises that frankly should be left alone, there was enough ingenuity and enough originality to Wonka to where I didn't really mind the fact it existed. And so once again, I'll defend it in like that aspect. For example, that's just a little minor tidbit that he kind of glossed over in the little background scheme of things, but it does let me know of kind of like the little foot we're starting off with. But I mean, like, to each their own.
I still went into Marty Supreme with pretty high hopes, but came out massively disappointed, and personally thought it was one of the most overinflated pieces of crap I've seen this decade so far. If I could start with my broadest critique, I would say that this movie really has no inner dialogue whatsoever, and while Marty as a character does have interesting baseline characteristics, like the fact that he is an internationally competitive ping pong player, we get no sense of how he came to this talent, how he maintains it, and he puts no real value on it himself throughout the movie.
And now we get to his very first argumentative point. The best way I can summarize this argument in kind of a little tidbit short of information is Mr. Fantano simply doesn't like the lack of ping pong, and he doesn't like the lack of appreciation that Marty shows for ping pong. Specifically, he mentions that Marty doesn't exactly hone or train his like ping pong ability, and when he does actually play ping pong, it's to manipulate others in some form or fashion. And so with all that considered, it kind of makes the ending match, one of the biggest climactic events in the entire movie. It kind of feels hollow because Marty simply, for his argument, doesn't seem to care about ping pong. And so his argumentative point is kind of lengthy and there's a lot to dissect there. So I'll try to go one by one in the best way I can. But I'll start with this. I actually do see where he's coming from. Because when I originally left the theater and I originally was walking out, I was kind of thinking to myself like, wow, I really enjoyed the ping pong segment of the movie. I really wish there were more ping pong in this ping pong movie. I was like thinking about it, and I was really expecting there to be some sort of training scene of where we see Marty hone his skills to defeat Kodo at the very end of the movie. And then once we got to the match, I kind of realized, oh, that's training sequence that I was expecting just simply doesn't happen. Like, it can't happen. We're too far into the movie. He's already facing Kodo. And so after I left the actual theater and I kind of drove home and I was kind of thinking about it, it starts to make a lot more sense why there wasn't more ping pong in the movie. It's because the movie isn't really about ping pong. It's about Marty. It's Marty being destructive, and it's him being destructive to the point where he actually inhibits himself multiple times throughout the movie from achieving his dream, of which, by the way, his dream simply doesn't matter to most of the world. The money, unless you're at the very, very top, is minimal at most. The fame, it's even mentioned specifically in the movie, nobody in the US, where Marty comes from, cares about ping pong. And despite all this, and despite him knowing that, he still tries to pursue his dream in the shittiest way possible. He robs people. He abandons his girlfriend. He makes rude and insensitive comments to people literally trying to throw him a lifeline. In the first 10 or 15 minutes of the movie, he's literally presented with a manager position at the job he works at, a job he literally says he can be excellent at. He can be the top salesman, the top shoe salesman at whatever company he's at. He doesn't even need to try. And he rejects it for, once again, ping pong. To the short-sighted, it may seem like, oh, that action revolves around his dream to, be the best at ping pong. But no, it's based around him literally handicapping himself and choosing a wrong decision to pursue his dream. If Marty accepted the manager position, this movie would have ended, once again, in the first 10 minutes or so. But that's the point. With the exception of him being snubbed of money at the very, very, very beginning of the movie, almost every single misfortune that happens to Marty is due to his own actions. The plot of the movie should not be interpreted as Marty has to overcome certain obstacles so he can defeat the champion of ping pong, Mr. Kodo Endo, I believe his name is. The plot of the movie is actually, we want to see Marty succeed at one thing and he keeps getting into his own way.
Which is why I felt disheartened by this feeling that I was tired of seeing Marty's narcissistic ass on the screen by the time we hit the final match. Why is this, you may ask? Well, Marty as a person is kind of a massive piece of shit, which isn't inherently a bad thing. I mean, sometimes evil does win, and I do occasionally love an anti-hero. Marty Supreme never forces Marty to reckon with his bad behavior, his evil ways, through either an inner dialogue or voice or any kind of serious consequences for his actions. Again, what makes this movie awful isn't just that Marty is a bad guy, it's that the film itself and the progression of events essentially okays this behavior and says, yeah, that's fine. Going into this movie, the message, believe me, is not like, get inspired, be determined. No, the message is more like, hey, if you didn't know, you could basically force and riz your way through any situation so long as you're coercive enough.
Marty's ultimate goal in the movie was to attend the tournament again, and so he could beat Kodo for the ping pong championship and be the top player of ping pong. However, when he's in Japan and, he kind of spots the main chief, planner guy, at his little dinner table, whatever, he goes to him and he's like, yeah, hey, I can pay the fine. I can be at your tournament. So, whatever I lose out here, don't take it seriously. Because, no, the real game is actually in the 2 weeks or whatever. And you know what he gets told? No, we don't want you. We do not like your antics. And you are a stereotypical American. We don't want you anymore. And so I think it's unfair to say he never gets any real consequences when his ultimate goal for the entire movie at that point gets shut down and it's unfulfilled for the rest of the movie. Now, he did get around it by playing Kodo in an exhibition match, burning his very last bridge through Mr. Rockwell. But once again, at that point, that's his very last lifeline. He doesn't have anything after that. And he may not have even won, but he bet on himself for it. So yes, you can say that he did scrape by in a lot of his moments where he should have been shut down. But the reason it worked is because the people around him aren't like Marty. Most of them have a forgiving nature of some kind, and most of them aren't as abusive towards their relationships as Marty. So once again, he's not able to quite achieve his peak goal. He did have to settle for something else. But another major part of the movie is when he got paddled by Mr. Rockwell. Because not only was it painful, but hey, guess what happens to the guy that has a lot of ego when he's paddled in front of a bunch of, rich old white guys, in a very crowded area? It's humiliating. And it's something that Marty will probably never be able to live down. But nonetheless, the message of the movie is more like, hey, you can be the best NFL player of literally all time. You can be a quarterback and you can go literally like one-on-one with like Tom Brady. And no matter what, because of your antics and because you're a shitty person, you're actually never going to be in the NFL. The most you can probably squeeze out is maybe the practice squad for some unbelievable reason where you have to burn so many bridges and you have to kiss ass where it really truly does matter. But no matter what, the big leagues where you actually should be at and where you on some part, skill-wise deserve to be at, you're simply never going to be there because of the way you acted. And because that is the consequence of pursuing your dream completely unchecked.
And not only is there never a moment where he stops to think about his actions, but also he's never really told no either, or he never hears a no that he doesn't instantaneously turn into a yes. Even when he's being a total scoundrel and obviously spouting BS, they repeatedly give in to his every whim, even when they know he is full of shit, even after they have voiced out loud that they know this and have very little to gain from helping him or getting involved with him, and they just do it anyway.
One of the major things about Marty as a character too is he is a very notorious liar. That's literally how he managed to be able to track down Mr. Rockwell that one time by calling his like little secretary on the phone or something and just lying through his teeth. So while on a first kind of approach to a random person, he kind of just lies his way through it, and it's up to the person whether they can catch it or not. And once they catch it, it kind of just is how charming of a person are they. Are they charming enough to where you can kind of ignore it? And for the most part, the people in the movie kind of can. When the Paltrow, she just gets some like good sex out of it, like she kind of just doesn't care. His dad at the very beginning of the movie wanted to arrest him, and the only reason why he wasn't arrested was because it's his child. Nobody wants to arrest their own child. Come on, You can literally see Timothée Chalamet's acting on the screen. You can kind of see that white boy charm that he has, literally white boy of the year, mind you. But yeah, I feel like that's a pretty simple and kind of forward explanation for how he kind of gets away with things, because he either, one, lies about it, or two, he's charming enough to where people can't ignore it, or three, once again, the people around him are a lot more forgiving than, once again, he is.
But yeah, I genuinely feel like the moral of this film is just be as impulsive and as stupid as you can possibly be, and it'll just be all cool. Don't worry. And Marty, even though he's like a massive piece of shit repeatedly, like at numerous points over and over and over, he's like still a good guy with a heart of gold. Look at him. When he sees his own son through the glass at the hospital, he cries. Meanwhile, me, after watching what he had done for the past 2 hours, I'm thinking, that kid is fucked.
I'm surprised this was kind of like a very last part that he kind of glossed over, because I feel like this might be the strongest and most direct way of critiquing the movie as a whole. And the baby scene to me just kind of seems like it's the most difficult to comprehend and break down to understand. Why does Marty break down at the very end of the movie and cry? Is it because he likes being a father? Well, you can't really say that. There's no evidence towards it, this is kind of like a real thing people do. He doesn't run away from the baby. He seems to want to take care of the baby. So it's clearly not a matter of he's crying because he doesn't enjoy having a child. And you know for sure that he is looking forward to being the father of the child because he literally says, hey, while crying, welcome to your life. I kind of interpret the scene as this. And this is not an original thought. I've seen this tossed around before. But Marty officially went against Kodo. So he goes home, he comforts Rachel, and he sees the baby. And it seems to be his next challenge in life, being a father. It seems like Marty is the type of character that always needs a type of challenge, a type of something to achieve in life. And so being a parent is one of the hardest things somebody can do. And so from that standpoint, it kind of makes sense to me why he embraces it so much, because to him, it's a challenge. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination, it's supposed to be seen as some type of reward or accomplishment. You know, there's a common sentiment among my peers, a lot of Gen Z, people that don't want children of any kind. So once again, I don't want to interpret it as simply the fact that, oh, since he's a parent now, he has to become a parent, because once again, people don't really think that way. And it does make sense as well to some extent, because up to this point, in terms of affection, in terms of love, Marty seems to have only shown that to one character, and that was Rachel. After Rachel came to him originally and was like, hey, this baby's yours, Marty, he didn't care. He didn't give a fuck. But once she came with a bruising of some kind, well, Marty saw that. And yeah, low-key, he kind of locked in and he was taking care of her any way he could. Even after he found out that the bruising turned out to be makeup, he still cared for her in a lot of instances. But all in all, I seem to have covered most of his major points about Marty Supreme. Once again, I think personally Marty Supreme is a very, very good movie. I think it's very good on a lot of different aspects, both in terms of the technical aspects of the filmmaking process, but also in terms of the writing of the characters and how only after kind of you really think about it does it really make sense of why characters behave this way and why every single step and every single detail of the movie is the way it is. Oh, and one last thing, obviously, I still very much like Anthony Fantano. This is not supposed to be some attacking thing about him at all. It's just he reviewed a movie. I liked the movie. He didn't. That's simply it.